I was brought up in New York, spent a lot of my young adult life working for a landscaper who was my next door neighbor. And it just sort of, being outdoors and working with plants sort of got into my blood. And so when I came down here to go to school, originally I was headed to law school. Law school, you're inside a lot. So I didn't want to do that. And I ended up, I got a degree at Duke first, and then I ended up going back to NC State to get a second degree in horticulture. Met a fellow named J.C. Ralston, who was on the faculty. He was my mentor. He was the one who really talked me into going into the nursery business. It started in my backyard at a rental property, and finally came out here and bought this property. We had over 150 greenhouses on the site by the time I retired. J.C. Ralston, my mentor, who was a horticulture teacher at NC State, he would bring his class out, and I talked about business. I'd probably been in business for maybe 10, 12, 15 years, something like that. I was beginning to think, how do I get out of this business? I've made this business. Now what do I do with it? And just a realization that it's time for a younger generation with new ideas, new energy, new perspectives to come in and take over.
I was born and raised in Spring Hope, North Carolina, which is east of Raleigh, so a really big farm town. So I grew up on a farm. My grandparents farmed. My very first job was working in a tomato greenhouse, and so that really made me interested in greenhouse production and wanting to do something outside and not being at a desk all day. And so that led me to NC State and graduating in the horticulture department with a minor in ag business management. Before graduation, I saw an ad in Craigslist
for a grower, and Dana came out and we interviewed, and I thought, wow, this is great.
I was growing in both growing plants and people and leadership, and so he brought me into that. Allowed me a lot of opportunity to go to trade shows for continuing education.
Two books that became, one in particular that was very vital for me, was called Passing the Torch, and it was written by a CPA. It had some of the really basic transfer ideas that I went over, I mulled over, how to do it and everything. And then the other one is, it's a dummies book. It's called Selling Your Business for Dummies. And that book is incredibly comprehensive. At one point, I asked her if she would be interested in taking over and purchasing the nursery. 2 years prior to the actual transition, we got attorneys, CPAs. Without my CPA, without my attorney, without Dana's attorney, we would never have really meshed this out. There was a back and forth literally for probably 18 months, I think. What we did entailed, it was an asset transfer, an asset purchase over a termed period. And we had 4 contracts that we created that dealt with assets, that dealt with personal goodwill, that dealt with the property itself in a lease situation, and then a property purchase. Our transition totally goes over a 15-year period. The property itself is over a 12-year period. So at this point, we're about halfway through. We went through about a 5-year process of training where Dana took more and more responsibility from me. I was still here. I was still very active. It's not like I walked away at that point.
Doug retired June 30th of 2017. And so I think that was like a 5-year period from the moment we kind of said, okay, we're gonna jump into this to, his last full day of working.
One of my big things in transferring this was to take Dana to trade shows, introduce her to all the vendors, all the salespeople, so that they knew what was going on. We brought the staff in and had a staff meeting. The staff knew what was going on. So everybody began to understand the process more or less from the beginning, probably after we had gone through it for a couple of years.
It's not just about purchasing the business and saying, okay, PlantWorks now belongs to Dana. It's so much of what was in Doug's head, I needed to know. Anytime he would walk around the nursery, he'd be like, you wanna go walk? And I just followed. Even after he retired, He didn't move away and cut his phone off and change his number. He's been really accessible to answer questions, or being able to have that mentor and somebody that you can just like phone a friend and be like, hey, this happened today. I've never seen it before. Do you have experience with this? And that's been really, really beneficial to me.
You have to plan ahead. If you're going to self-fund the process, you have to 100% trust the person you are dealing with. I mean, I had 100% trust in Dana's ability and in her integrity to move the whole company forward, and that's what's panned out.